Hey guys, welcome back. I'm gonna give you a quick overview of whatever we have done until now. So we are already done with the JWT authentication and that the WebSocket connection that we are going to establish now is going to use that JWT token. So that's the first thing we are going to do: establish a session using the JWT token. And after that, as you can see already, we have all the chat rooms listed, but there is no way you can actually create a chat room. So that's the second thing that we are going to do, is to actually enable creation of a chat room, but then without the users adding any of the members in the chat room. So that's the second thing that you're going to do. On creation of the chat room, something can go wrong. Like if there is a failure from the server, we should allow the user to retry sending that same request back to the server. So we are going to show a nice looking error message as well as a success message views when you're actually creating a chat room. So that's the third thing we are going to do, where we will set up the views where you can actually show whenever there is a chat room failure, you will allow the user to retry. So that's the third thing. And fourth thing is, as soon as the chat room is established or created, we are going to use the WebSocket to send a notification to all the logged in users. So we are not filtering out the users as yet right now, but then it will be propagated to all the users who can actually use that notification to sync their chat rooms. So real time, you're going to see when a chat room is getting created, it's going to get synced across devices. That's what we're going to target today. 4 episodes. So let's get started. So let's start with the JWT login feature, where we are going to authenticate and connect to the server, WebSocket server, using the JWT. So before that, I'm going to modify some of the things which is existing right now. For that, first thing I'm going to do is to segregate these protocols into its own specific functionalities. Like I'm going to include something called as a WebSocket response API, which is only going to keep whenever there is a WebSocket server response which is coming back, it's going to, whoever needs it can consume this and then establish a WebSocket server call from there itself. So it's going to be the interactors which is going to use it. And I'm going to modify even this one. I'm going to call it as, so the first one I'm going to implement right away, so that because it's already used within this interactor, this service, where you have this socket response which is implemented now. So also I'm going to modify this one. So whatever right now we have is a login which we were using without JWT earlier, but with JWT we are going to modify it. It's not going to be called as login but something else. So account WebSocket API, I have modified renamed chatroom WebSocket API to account WebSocket API. So this will be consumed by something like an account interactor, which is very specific, which only includes some very specific function for that. I'm going to get rid of this function called login, which was only valid for the earlier implementation, where we were using direct login without any authentication. But with the new implementation, we don't need that. Instead, I'm going to create a function called setup connection. So it's going to be setup connection, and it's going to ask for a couple of parameters like socket URL. It's going to be of type URL, and authentication and a token, auth token, which is nothing but the authenticated token which we created during our access token, which we created while logging in from the HTTP server. So this is the same thing which you're going to use to be sent to this WebSocket server. So these two servers are different. The HTTP server is something where it's only validating your credentials and then giving you a token, and this WebSocket server is where you are sending this token and then validating yourself for a secure connection, and then you start doing the transaction. Let's say creating a chat room or sending messages, and all that is going to happen using this JWT token authentication. So for that is what we are gonna make these changes right now. I'm gonna create a function called setup account right now. It's going to be a function which accepts socket URL and the auth token to set up the connection and then authenticate the user. So I'm going to include this function over here, setup connection, and we are going to have some of the earlier implementation itself, like similar things, but then I'm gonna modify it a little bit. Single dot create single. So the basic structure to create always a single is like this. Disposables dot create. That's my single. It's not going to give me any error. It's always already returning a single void. That's fine. Now let's set up the connection. So you already have something called as a socket. You already have a function called setup over here. So I can just use this function. So instead I could have just created the, okay, anyway, whatever I have within this, which was used in the earlier tutorial where we were just connecting to the WebSocket, is what I'm going to use here, but then I'm going to modify it. So we had a socket manager which we used to create a socket, passing the socket URL. So you already have this URL. I'm going to use that here. First thing, that is resolved right now. So we have the socket manager, and there are some more things which these socket managers needs. So I'm going to configure it so that I can also see some logs of what goes on, like all the whatever in the terminal, we can see what goes on whenever there is a socket logging happens. Let's say if you connect to a server and then it starts logging information from there. So for that, I'm going to use this. I'm going to also log that first thing, or also compress is one more parameter which I need to add. I'm grabbing all this information from one of the implementation I had done on the server using the JWT. So that URL is coming from community socket io JWT. So there they are explaining about different ways of connecting to the WebSocket server using the JWT kind. It can be one single connection which can be established by passing the JWT token within a parameter, or it can also be using a round trip where you set up a connection with the socket and then you send the authorization parameters in the next step to do the second handshake. So I'm pretty much doing this second approach where I'm creating a handshake, like first I authorize and then connect. So that's what I'm going to use in this case. So this the second approach where I need to send the token for each step. So if you want to refer this one, go to socketio.jwt. This is what I'm using on the server implementation. So this is the same thing. I just extracted their implementation for the client as well. So whatever happens is, like I said, I'm just doing some config changes over here. Also for the socket manager, I'm just going to add some more configurations, which is going to be the key value pair, socket config, socket IO client configuration is what I'm going to do. It will accept an array literal where you can pass n number of configurations. So one of the configuration is connection parameters, which will be the token which is needed. So I'm going to use that param. It's going to be a key value where the key is string and a value is any value. So it's going to accept token as a first key, token as the key, and the auth token which we passed as the value. So I can just pass that as the first parameter to the connection param. It's again like this. Okay. And one more param I can pass is to secure, which is also needed, is secure. I'm just going to say it false. We can try making it true and see what happens. So that is the basic changes which I'm doing to pass the auth token to the socket WebSocket server. So these are the configuration changes. One is to log, compress, and the other configuration change is to set the connection param, which is like the token, auth token, which is the JWT token which our server created. So that's one change. So after that, config default, we are already setting the default socket to with the connection, socket connection, we are setting the default connection, and then you do a connection. And once it is connected, I need to use the single to send a response to the consuming function to say that my job is done. So for that, I need to say success I'm just passing an empty thing here. Always I end up clicking on that N, and which pops up the new function file creation thing. So I also need to move this one out. I'm going to create a function for that as private function. Setup is totally gone. We don't need that setup anymore. Instead, I'm going to create a function called what should I call it? SetupSocketResponse. SetupSocketResponse. And it's going to accept auth token, because I also need to use this to do the second hand. Like I said, it's going to be a handshake thing where you connect and then send a request for authentication. So that's why I need to pass this auth token over here, and there is no parameter required. So I'm gonna move this one out of this and just modify things around there. So it's always going to be on chat socket response.login response. We don't have a login response anymore. It's going to be some other things, like it's going to be, one is what should happen on connect. So I'm just going to change this to first thing, response is going to be connect. First response coming from the server will be connect. So if you see the server code, there are different endpoints, at least events from the server which will be triggered. All the emits are the server emits, which will come to the client, which we will receive on the on. So these are authenticated is an event which the server is listening to. Authenticate is something they will do, and we need to listen to. Once that is authenticated, we can listen to that. So I have defined all the keys required, but based on your server, what they have defined as their keys, you need to modify these keys, which are like the emit keys and the on subscription keys. So that is what I have created as request and response over here. So one thing which is going to happen is, what should happen as soon as the connect is done. So I'm just the first list, the callback on is always a callback from the server. It's going to be on this key called connect. First thing, as soon as the WebSocket connection is established, it's going to give me a callback through this connect. Those are parameters, a data array. If there is a data coming back from the server, I'm not expecting anything from, I'm not going to use any of the callbacks from the server, the values. At least I'm going to see whether it's connected or not. So it's going to always come through this. So if it is connected, I'm going to say self.socket we need a function. Okay, we need to emit something. We need to emit an event. So we need to define that emit within this request called static. This is where I told it's going to be a handshake. So first connection happens through this connect. So for that connect, we are already passing the tokens which will authenticate at the server. If you send a wrong token, you are going to get a callback of unauthorized. If it is authenticated, if it is connected, you don't need this login anymore. If it is connected, you get a callback through this, and then we need to trigger a request to the server. It's going to be a request. So this was a response from the server called connect. And then the second handshake happens from our end called authenticate. You are calling the authenticate function, socket function, and we need to pass a token over here. So the parameter we need to pass is similar whatever we defined here. Let's capture that parameter. This is the second handshake which is going to happen. We capture that and pass it as the parameter over here. It's giving an error. It's over here. We don't have a setup function anymore. We can get rid of that because it's not going to happen anymore during init. It was earlier where we did not have any login feature. It was directly setting up a WebSocket connection. So this is what the change is. We have a function now exposed through this protocol called account WebSocket API, and we are going to call this setup connection as soon as the HTTP login is complete and we get a token response. And we also have this response from this WebSocket server, and connect is established. We do the second handshake, emit and authenticate with the parameter. That is when it is going to say whether we are authenticated or unauthorized or not. So for that, the status, we can create couple of authenticated and one more is unauthorized. If you send a wrong token or an expired token, that's when it will give you unauthorized as a second token. So that I don't mess it up, I'm just going to grab whatever is the key. Unauthorized is the second key. So we can always set 2 more callbacks for these. We can just print it. One is authenticated. What happens if the token, this emit call can authenticate the user? If he is authenticated, it's going to come through this channel then. So I'm just going to say print the user is authenticated or something. Print user is authenticated, just to see whether our server response happened or not. I'm just giving a couple of prints. User is unauthorized, and it's going to be the unauthorized key. So if the user is authenticated with the JWT token with this emit, it's going to come through this channel. If not, it's going to come through this channel. So if it is unauthorized, that if you're receiving, then maybe it's a good idea to send a signal to the window or some place where you can ask the user to be logged out forcibly or something, because authorization has failed with the WebSocket server. So that's the idea here. Or if it is refreshing and then rejoining, then it will resolve that issue. So we have the setup socket response ready. We need to call, we can call it once we set up the connection. So I can just say self.setup connection with the URL and not setup connection, setup socket response. Sorry, setup socket response passing the token. So auth token, and we need to fix something over here because we did not capture our closures weak self, otherwise it's gonna create a memory issue. So we need to capture that. Let self equals self, else return the observable. It's expecting a disposable to be the return type. So I think this should be fine, otherwise this was causing an issue. I guess this is what the setup function which we need, and the response callback we have already set up. So the changes which are needed on the WebSocket side is complete. Whatever it is the consumer now has to then use this. So first thing, who is going to send this setup connection? That is going to happen when the token is received. So for that, we need to do some changes for the token receiving part. Otherwise, it's not going to work. I'm going to include a token observable over here in the user settings where the actual token saving thing is happening, where this is where we are saving the tokens in the user defaults. So I'm going to create a token observable over here. RxSwift, need to import RxSwift, and I'm also going to import RxRelay. 2 things we might need. Token observable is of type observable of string, because token is a string. So we are receiving that here, and it's going to ask me property or protocol must be get, and it's going to ask me to implement it over here. So I can just implement it within the function token observable. I'm gonna keep it as private lazy because I need to create one more relay, one more relay to accept the token values. Private let token relay. This is nothing but which accepts access token over here. So it's going to be a behavior relay of string behavior relay, because behavior relay can actually replay the last value received. So let's say I save the token and I need to send it to some layer which needs to listen to these token changes. If I am having it as a published relay, it might not trigger instantaneously the earlier value. So it needs to be a behavior relay which will work like it can replay the last value. It's more like sending out a history of whatever things happened. So you can set the relay values to n, where n can stand for 1 to And so if you are setting it to 1, it is going to replay the last value, means it's going to give you the last stored value within the token relay. So that is going to be exposed through this token observable. So I'm going to add initial value of empty. So we might need to ignore this empty value, so that we can do. So because I have made it say lazy because I need to access this. Otherwise, if it's not lazy, if you, let's say if you're keeping it as a property, then it's going to say self is unidentified. So this with lazy, it's going to be lazily loading at a later point. Then as soon as you access it, it is when this is going to get created. So that's the reason I'm keeping it as a lazy variable, and I'm going to create it as an observable, and I need to get the last value replayed. So I'm going to say share me the last value while I'm connected to you. So share the last value. This is called setting an observable as a cold observable. Means if your value is this observable is going to only send out signals, or whoever is subscribed can receive signals only when they are connected to it. So that's why it is while connected. So if n number of subscribers are subscribed to this observable, they are going to receive the values only when they are connected. So as soon as the connection or the reference count goes to 0, this stops sending any more signals. So that's called a cold observable. So if you can always make it as forever as well. This is called hot observable, where if even if you're not subscribed to it, it will keep sending the values to even just like that. You don't need to be subscribed. So advantage and disadvantages, I'm not sure where you can use it, but that's a concept at a concept level, that if you are connected, then you start receiving it. So as soon as you connect, let's say you're not connected, and you go to a new screen from one, let's say listing screen to a detail screen, and then detail screen is newly a new screen where this subscription happens. That is when it this subscription is set for that specific detail screen. Because we have set the replay to 1, that detail screen is going to receive the last value which is stored within this behavior relay. And because it is while connected, it's going to start sending that signal as soon as the connection happens. You can always call it forever as well if it needs to be propagated always, even if you are not connected to it. So that is the behavior relay. I'm just explaining this much because I received some comments saying we are not comfortable with RX suite, so it needs more explanation so that understanding is better. So that's why I'm explaining it a little more. Why behavior relay? You can also be a publish relay, but then publish relay is not going to replay the last value even if you are setting all these. So that's the reason I'm keeping it as a behavior relay. And for this specific use case, we need behavior relay. So this token is set now. Now it needs to receive some values. One of the place it can receive a new value is while saving. So get tokens can receive a changed value, like can accept a value from even not from here, sorry, from when it is saving. Let's say this is the place, save tokens, and I can just say token data dot access token. And there we are also responsible for maybe clearing the last token received when you are clearing it. So this is where we can maybe set it to empty. There is no token is getting cleared, so I also need to clear it from here. So to place, this is not enough. These are the save token is only going to get called when you are actually logging in or you're signing up. Those are the two scenarios. But what happens if you are launching the app and you're already logged in and it directly goes to the chat rooms? So we might need that last value to be sent to us. So for that, we can even call this accept, but we receive use the user defaults value over here. So we can just say this. So as soon as the app is relaunched, token relay receives a value, and whoever subscribes will get these last value subscribed. And save token can happen in 3 places actually. One is sign up, one is login, and the third one is if the token is expired and you do a refresh token, which is happening internally right now using the JWT refresher, which we created in the last episode, where the refresh code HTTP service is having this JWT access token interceptor. We need to change, we need to do a change over here. Later I'll do it, but then this is where the token expiration, you are also saving it. That's a third place. So this is done now. So we have the token relay and an observable exposed. Now we need this observable to be consumed somewhere. That somewhere we already have, which is the account interactor. So this is where we are going to set up the connection with the WebSocket. This connection to the WebSocket is going to happen as soon as you either log in or you sign up or you launch the app and you are already signed out. You are already logged in and you are launching the app, where you validate and you are directly go into the tab bar screen. At that point also you need to actually set up the connection with the server. So for that is the reason I created this observable right now, because as soon as the value is received to the observable, we can start setting up a connection. Every time, even if it is changing, we can maybe disconnect and reset the connection back, because the JWT token can expire and then you are refreshing it with our refresh logic or something. So whenever we send a request to send a message or something, it's going to refresh the token at that point. So that is where we can use it. So I'm gonna create a function over here to set up the subscription on the account interactor side. So I'm gonna call it as function setup socket connection. So this is going to be a subscription based thing where we are going to use, like I said, I need the user settings. I right now created a token observable. So this is going to change whenever a token is received, and it's going to be get, like I said, we are subscribing it over here. So it's a cold subscription because we have a subscription over here, and an account interactor is going to remain there during the life cycle of the app, like even on launch or on sign up or any time, it's going to remain. So you are going to get this last value replayed to you from that observable. So I'm going to also do a filter over here, because there are two kinds of filters which might happen. Like I'm gonna say, if the token is not empty, only then you propagate this signal, because otherwise I don't need to set up a connection if it is an empty token or something. So that is the case here. So if I'm getting a signal from the token and if it is not empty, then I'm going to use a URL value. So I already have I don't have a URL. I'm going to use the WebSocket's URL to establish the connection. So I'm going to grab that URL over here. It's going to be the local URL where I'm like right now connected to. This is my local server. I'm already connected. The WebSocket is already running in this port 80. So I'm going to use this to with latest from, I'm going to say observable.jest. It's just, I'm just using it to create an observable out of this URL. It's just a string right now, but I'm converting that into a URL using this observable.jest. So I'm combining this signal with this one to create a new signal which will have dollar URL string $0 $1 is the second one. This is the URL signal. This is $0 is the first one URL, and the second one, the first one is my token. So those are the two parameters I need to establish a WebSocket connection. That's why I'm just accepting it like this. And now I'm saying, so I have these two values right now. I'm going to use that to flat map. I can even say, okay, let's start with map and I'll tell you why I need a flat map. Map. So it's already giving me this URL. Okay, it has to be force casting just to make it a proper URL. Now it is saying a URL and a string is received. This is nothing but the URL and a token. So I'm going to use that token URL Okay, it should be the other way, URL and token in. So now I can say subscribe, all that thing, subscribe to it. So this is where the subscription is happening. So because I'm now subscribed to this, not yet, because I need to call this somewhere. Setup socket connection should happen on init of this. So this will set up the subscription, but it's not actually starting to send the signals. And it's signal receiving is totally dependent on the token observable. As soon as it receives a non-empty value, right now I have instantiated with an empty value, so it's not going to fire because I don't have anything over here. So I can always say skip one to avoid that first signal, something like that. Skip one means it will avoid that first signal. I'm not doing that yet. But if once this is happening, if it is non-empty signal, I use this local URL and create an observable out of it, and then I create a parameter set. So this signal whole chain is happening and I'm receiving those two here, and I'm going to use that to already I have user settings already. Okay, whatever I need now to set up the WebSocket connection is the WebSocket service which I created. I only need the account WebSocket API because that has a function to set up the connection. Setup connection is happening here. I'm going to use that. It's accepting a URL and a not token. That's why I created like the parameter list like this, so that I can just pass these URL and the token. So that's the reason I created like that. So I already have this WebSocket service created. I'm gonna create instant or capture a reference over here, WebSocket service, and then that is available right now. I'm gonna pass it to this capture closure part. WebSocket service is available. I'm just gonna call the setup connection and pass the URL and the token. And I need the dispose bag. I need to also create that. Private let bag equal to dispose bag. Dispose bag is nothing but a garbage bag which you carry and dispose your things. So you are just keeping every element as a garbage right now. Like as soon as you're disposed by a bag, you're adding this observable to a disposable bag. And once its job is done, let's say this class gets deinitated, you're throwing it within that garbage, and so that reference is lost. So now okay, this is already asking for because we modified one, we added one more parameter, and we need to, this is for the earlier implementation where we had the WebSocket service created, but we just removed it because we wanted to go through the login flow. So I'm just adding that right now. It should not give me an error. And I have mapped it over here. I don't think this will work because it's not going to get called, because this is again a new observable which is getting created. Setup connection is going to send a type of single API. If it was void like this, then I could have done a map, because I'm not expecting a observable. So this needs to subscribe. So for that I need to change this map to a flat map. So flat mapping helps you transform one observable to another. This was one observable which was carrying this URL and this information, and using those two I am actually creating a new observable over here. So if I was just mapping it, mapping is just like you are transforming transforming one observable to in another form. It's actually the same signal which is getting transformed, but in this case this is now creating a new observable by passing this URL and token and calling this function. You are actually creating a new observable. So for that you need to actually call a flat map or a flat map latest. There's a difference between flat map and flat map latest. I'm not taking up that right now, but then you can use a flat map to get a response. This is now created a new observable, and you can always map its value back like this. So you will get an empty observable saying, you will get a signal over here within this map saying the setup connection is complete right now. but I'm not doing that. Maybe I can debug and keep it so that you know that there is a signal which was received. So I can just say setup connection false, setup connection observable. I'm just debugging it over there. So that's done. So we have the setup WebSocket connection done. So as soon as a token is received, if it is a non-empty token, you set up the WebSocket connection. That's the idea over here. So this is going to ideally happen during login, sign up, or whenever a refresh token is happening, or even when you are relaunching the app, where it's going to pick up that last value from the init of WebSocket reference user settings. So this is also done. So we are very much closer to, I think, what is left. I guess we can just run and see whether the token, setting up the token is right now working or not. I think it should. Let's keep a breakpoint in the over here to see what we receive and whether it is setting up the connection or not. It should, even on relaunch it should, because it's receiving that token. It's carrying that token information because it's replaying that last value, and URL is also there. It's at local 80. So it's going to set up a connection right now. And we know that on setting up connection, it's going to give a couple of callbacks over here. So we should ideally expect it to come to user authenticated, because on connect, first thing it should come here, because as soon as this connection is established, let's keep a breakpoint here. Connection is established. You are setting up a response function to set up the callbacks. So once the connection is established, it's going to come here, and then we are going to emit the parameter like the second handshake, and that in turn is going to send a signal to the authenticated. If it is not a valid token, or if the valid token is expired, it's going to come to user is not authorized. Let's run this. It's come to the connect. It's come to the connect is successful. Now we are going to emit the authenticate using the token as access token, and you get user is authenticated. The server is authenticated me. If I go to the server, it will say hello wish. This is the last message I received, hello wish. So that's done. So we successfully managed to set up a connection. What will happen, let's say if I send a this is an old token. I'm going to just replace this and just show you what happens if I send a token which is old. That's going to happen like, I'm going to just say let access let auth token equals the old one. This is an old one. It should say the token has expired. That is a way of identifying whether we are validating our server properly or not. So this is an old token. Let's see what happens. So it's saying user is unauthorized. So you can see JWT is expired, or that's perfectly fine. What happens if you send a wrong JWT? It should say the JWT is malformed. So it's validating the server. So these are two different servers. JWT is coming from invalid signature. So signature is wrong. So it's properly giving me the responses from the server. And now if I send a proper request, it's already having that proper one. User is authenticated. So we are getting, and you should again see hello I wish, because that is a user I have logged in with. So this is working fine. This is what I wanted to show in the first episode, where JWT we are using to set up a secured connection with the WebSocket. So I hope this was helpful. We are going to go with the next episode, where I'm going to show you how to create a chat room. And once the chat room is created, it's going to show a couple of screens where it shows whether it is successful. If not, it's going to show an error message screen and an option to retry. Again, it goes through the whole process of sending it to the server. And once that token, once the chat room creation is successful, I'm going to use WebSocket to send a notification to all the logged in users who can actually sync their chat rooms using the notification. And that notification is going to carry that chat room information, so that they can directly use that information to store it within their local storage. Like, you don't need to totally sync everything. So I'm not targeting specific users as such right now. It's going to be propagated to all the logged in users right now. That is how the server is working right now. So don't expect it to be targeting only specific users. That's not the implementation as yet. That the server has to take care, because whoever is sending, and if that chat room participants you already can identify and then target those users, that's easier, and then it's not going to block your network, where in this case it's going to send to all the users. So at least I'm just going to demonstrate how we can sync your real-time sync. How can it work using WebSocket? That is something coming up. So 2-3 episodes is what we are planning to complete these. So this one is complete. Let's get started with the next one in a bit.